I saw a video on YouTube the other day that stated, quote, "Does my love for my people contradict love for other nations in missions?" End quote. You'll notice that Baptists and evangelicals and quasi-non-denominational or pan-denominational, whatever, are the only ones asking these kinds of questions. Other questions like, quote, "Is America a Christian nation?" End quote, etc. I find it all very ironic. For the most part, these groups are struggling with these questions of nationalism. I mean, if we actually read Augustine, that is the City of God, without bias, and with scripture alongside, we'll see that that work was never intended or even to kingdom all along. The idea of the city of God and the kingdom of heaven have always been intermingled. Matthew chapter 13. Christians who conflate these things are committing the same error as the Pharisees in proposing that there's a two-kingdom theology / reality. So, yeah, the 2K theology guys seem to make the same errors that Dispies make, in that they utterly misrepresent the opposition and then end up strawmanning people who actually love their country. And that's why I think that CN is like a boogeyman for these people. But here's what's telling, is that they're afraid of something. The people that are like, decrying CN and all that. I don't know what they're afraid of yet, but it is telling that they're afraid of something that true love for one's country holds, and that's what's suspicious to me. But anyway, maybe it's just suspicion. It's probably because I believe that those who, cast shade on the idea of CN or whatever, are still influenced by the image constructed by our feminist society, or what's left of it. Even though that liberalist, globalist, secularist, humanist, feminist, blah, blah, blah society, world order is waning. So CN, being Christian, is inherently patriarchal, and so this idea of feminist society hates it and paints it in the worst light that they can. And that's why I think that the Two Kingdom guys are buying that propaganda, whether knowingly or not. There is a reaction, I believe a genuine revival, against feminism, hence all the liberal progressive people literally turning insane and occultist, like the rainbow sandwich and yada, to try and justify their means. A big part of it is that the same feminism in reference was to be used as somewhat coherent mid-left that was operating from a gospel-centered framework at one time. But that died in like the 50s, if you ask me. And that idea was overwhelmed by the liberal, feminist, globalist, yada yada, that has degenerated into the woke movement. Now, there's a really good book called Jesus and the Feminists, and it describes that feminism hit a wall back in the 60s and 70s when it went on birth strikes, or women that were going on birth strikes, etc. And anything after that didn't make sense because it wasn't really supposed to make sense. It was just reactionary, revolutionary, whatever you call it. Basically, the trans movement, if it can be called that, had to subscribe to something. So feminism got lost through all of that in what this book essentially calls like a fifth wave feminism. And I wonder, again, just speculation, if another woke movement after this latest one, which is just another stab at oneism, really, that means oneism is defined as like the false idea that reality is defined in non-binaries or whatever. I do wonder if another woke movement would be tried at through some imagined like children's crusade or something like that. So the idea of that is, which is just another communist weaponization to try and thwart Western patriarchal family model by claiming the children are being oppressed by their parents, that parenthood should be outlawed, etc. Again, it's a fear, but it's a fear tactic, communist tactic that's been used over and over again. And one which I hope we don't see in the States. What we have going on in the States that's in our favor right now is, number one, a strong deontological memory and the willingness to do what's right, reject what's wrong, i.e. banning abortion, banning all kinds of chemicals like THC and stuff like that. And number two, we're still a very diverse population, and English is a business language with many dialects and unassimilated peoples who still hold to a sense of morality, i.e. like in the Hispanic cultures, Asian cultures, respect for parents, patriarchal structure, etc. It's not just not just a new idea. It's an idea that's inherent in our DNA, and it's what keeps people groups together. Faith, family, and tradition. I find it very ironic that questions like the one said before about, does my love for my people contradict love for other nations and missions and yada yada, is being asked by these groups, seeing that we send the most missionaries, print the most Bibles, and essentially have made church a business. So these Anabaptist, Baptistic, Pentecostal, evangelical, non-denominational circles, etc., are very sensitive to the topic of now, make sure you don't love your country more than your creator. Meanwhile, they don't proselytize or evangelize within their own country or their own population, their own backyard. That is, those in the evangelical missionary enterprise would rather do, quote, like the easy work by going to other nations. People would actually listen to what they're saying, or rather just receive services or goods, all the freebies. I don't want to say that it's a major grift, but there are some elements of that are within that evangelical missional enterprise. How can we describe this idea of just going to other nations rather than preaching to our own and then just watching everything at home just kind of go haywire? How can we describe that except it's a lesson in biblical ethics and missions from a reverse Jonah type lesson, where we don't want to minister to our own because our own receive us not? But why is that? But then again, if you look at a lot of these circles and, short-term mission trip groups and things like that, look at the Sunday service. I believe everything comes down to the Sunday service. For one, we don't include our children in the service, let alone we don't even include them in a covenant of God. And I'm talking about, the taking of sacraments, having them be in the service with us. We exclude people through age segregation along that same frame of thought. But we've made church a business model rather than an actual army and hospital. Additionally, we've told men for a generation now, at least a couple of generations now, to basically go circumcise themselves, for lack of a better term. And so there's not a strong sense and understanding like, hey, men are the future. Instead, a lot has been given to women, which is unscriptural. That is in the service, like women speaking, leading worship, reading of scripture. And that's not scriptural. Moreover, the young people, again, generally, like not all the time, are discouraged from getting married, having children, or trained and discipled by the older people because the older people are consumed with title, prestige, personal peace, affluence, etc. So the problems here are all rooted in one thing, I believe, which is the cultural captivity of the church. Fortunately, Jesus is the Christ of the covenants, and as such, he has bonded, he has married himself, he has covenanted himself with his bride, the church, who is the Israel of God. Not just a parenthetical thought, but center stage on the world. Center stage in the world. And pivotal to the redemption of the world. So, put that in your glass and drink it.